This week on Africa Update, 10 years after initiating AU's Silencing the Guns program, conflict continues to ravage African countries. How effective is the role of the African Union in conflict resolution on the continent? This is Africa Update, reaching you from the nation's capital in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ila. Thank you for joining. Several African countries have for decades been plagued by conflicts resulting in the death and displacement of millions while retarding development on the continent. From the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, Central African Republic, Somalia, Ethiopia, etc., several reasons have been attributed to be cause for these conflicts, some of which includes quest for political power, resource control, ethnic discord, among others. For some African countries, the quest for stability is as old as the country's independence, as peace remains a dream that may never be fulfilled anytime soon. The African Union, established in 1963, has one of its core mandates the promotion of peace, security, and stability on the continent. But how effective is the role of the African Union in conflict resolution on the continent? This month marks a decade since the AU initiated its campaign to silence the guns with an aim to end conflicts in Africa.
In May 2013, the African Union adopted the program for silencing the guns by 2020 as part of a declaration marking the 50th anniversary of the AU, formerly the Organization of African Union. The declaration, which is part of efforts to realize a conflict-free Africa, has a target to end all wars in Africa by 2020. To achieve this, the AU Peace and Security Council adopted an AU Master Roadmap of practical steps to silence the guns 3 years after the declaration during a November 2016 retreat in Lusaka, Zambia. Some of the steps outlined in the AU Master Roadmap was to arms proliferation, stop suppliers and recipients from promoting and sustaining illicit business in arms weapons by naming and shaming suppliers and recipients of illicit arms in public, including at summit level. Funding. Adoption of the statute for the AU Special Fund for Prevention and Combating Terrorism and Violent Extremism. Good governance. Imposition of sanctions, punitive measures in cases of proven violation of AU instruments and governance and corruption that lead to conflict. Dialogue. Engagement of religious leaders, faith-based and interfaith organizations in the fight against terrorism, violent extremism, and radicalization in Africa, and to promote inter- and intra-religious constructive dialogue. However, at an extraordinary session in December 2020, the AU Assembly extended the implementation of the AU Master Roadmap to 2030.
Joining us to talk about this in the studio is the man behind the whole idea itself. I'm talking about Ambassador Bulus Lolo, former Nigeria's ambassador to Ethiopia, and also joining us virtually, Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired. He is a security expert. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Well, let me begin with you, Ambassador. The whole idea of silencing the guns, initiated in 2013, has a target to end conflicts on the continent by 2020. Now, this is 2023, although we are aware that that target has been extended to 2030. How would you assess this whole initiative and how much it has achieved so far?
Well, again, thank you, and it is a pleasure to be on this program today. It's my first time on Trust TV, so it is indeed a great pleasure for me. To your question, and let me start by the background that you so eloquently captured. about the state of conflict in Africa. In 2013, when the African Union then was marking 50 years of the OAU, which, as you said, was established in 1963, there weren't too many conflicts that were active then on the continent. The most potent and popular was Somalia, and then Mali, to an extent, was also simmering with Central African Republic. We felt that if Africa was to claim the 21st century as it was declared, then across the continent, there should be no sound of any gun. Of course, gunshots are fired sporadically, but when on a consistent basis you have a hot exchange of fire between forces as you have today in the Sudan, you did say in your introduction that it retards development. So we felt that for Africa to move forward, there should be an end to conflicts. And an end to conflicts would mean there is peace and stability. And where there is peace and stability, naturally there will be room for development. So African leaders who gathered in Ethiopia in May of 2013 committed then that in 7 years, they will agree to silence all guns across the continent, meaning ongoing conflicts and any emergent conflicts will not be allowed to take a life of their own. But unfortunately, in the 10 years that have elapsed since that landmark declaration, I dare say that the objective has remained a dream because the continent is still facing different conflicts. You mentioned Ethiopia, now Sudan itself. You have the situation in Mali. Somalia has become a forgotten issue almost, and we do not know where else conflict will erupt. But that's by way of responding to your question and remarks.
All right, let me go to Musa Salmanu. Given the structure that the AU has at the moment, do you think that the AU has the capacity to hold member countries accountable when it comes to, resolving conflicts like we have seen in some of the African countries?
Thank you once again for having me. It's a pleasure also speaking with the founding fathers, if I may say, of this initiative. But back to your question, the African Union, and its initial one, the Organization of African Unity, is a multilateral organization of equals. So, in terms of holding one or each other to kind of agreed standards and being the best members possible of an agreed behavioral pattern. So it's more of willing neighbors African nations coming together to willingly adopt a certain standard by which they hold themselves. The institutions are there, or the bodies of the African Union are there to ensure that all these standards are held. However, just like every other multilateral organization, you find out that to a large extent, there is a limit to which you can sanction or maybe sanction countries that do not abide by that. And also having at the back of your mind that it's a voluntary organization, but you want to have as many members as possible, and it's not punitive in nature. It's more of collaboration and cooperation that brings about unity, that brings about cooperation, and that brings about development. So the African Union as its structure, yes, has organs that can ensure this stability, that can ensure that people are held accountable and that countries are held accountable. However, it will take the resolve of individual countries and individual heads of states to ensure that there is this peer kind of agreement or peer agreement to stick to these rules or principles that are there. So yes, it has, but implementation has been very difficult because it's a committee of equals.
Okay. Well, Ambassador, what would you say are some of the challenges to the Silencing the Guns initiative itself since its establishment that you can see?
Well, let me comment on your last question, even though it wasn't addressed to me, and I'll tie it up with the challenges on silencing the gun. If you remember, we do have the African peer review mechanism in which African leaders examine themselves and give a scorecard on their performance. The intent there is that the leaders will learn by their individual examples, but there is no mechanism to hold any accountable, meaning it depends on the willingness of the leaders to do what is right. And I said I'm tying it to the challenges on silencing the gun. It is again about political will and the commitment in a demonstrable way to bring an end to those conditions that have held the continent, and by continent I'm referring to African people, backward. The killings that take place as a result of conflicts, the destruction, as we have seen, and general loss of opportunity. Look at the large number of internally displaced persons in the countries where we have conflict and across the continent. The migrants that are running away daily, taking perilous routes through channels that are unimaginable, in search of a better life, speak to one thing, that at home they are fearful for their lives. And so silencing the gun has met with very little commitment on the part of Africans. The second thing there that is dogging the policy is the lack of enforcement capacity. If you look back, when that decision was taken, it was taken by the Assembly of Heads of State. But the mandate then falls on the African Peace and Security Council, which is the organ that has the mandate for the prevention, the management, and resolution of conflicts on the continent. If you see the operations of the AUPSC, which is what the African Union Peace and Security Council acronym goes by, you will see that they do not have enough financial resources. They are dependent on donors for most of their operations, whether it is to launch a peace support mission or operation or to launch a peace mission. And so many other activities suffer because of lack of resources. So the two of lack of political will, lack of financial resources combine then to undermine the realization of the objective of silencing the guns.
Okay, well, let me stick with you. Now, one of the critical steps identified as contained in the master roadmaps of the silencing the guns was to stop the proliferation of small and light weapons.
Right.
What are the challenges to that? What would it take really to stop this proliferation of these light weapons?
In the first place, when you look at today the spread of small arms and light weapons, in countries, and sadly, Nigeria happens to be the main home of these small arms and light weapons. There has been in the last few years, in fact, since the collapse of the regime of Gaddafi, it opened a window through which these arms are flowing into our country. And the spike, the rise in terrorism is a clear indication of the ready availability of the small arms and light weapons. These weapons are not manufactured anywhere on our borders. They are not manufactured in Nasarawa State. They are not manufactured in any of our 36 states. Yet, in each of these states, they abound. So, the ready availability of the small arms and light weapons, if we are to get the hang of what we are doing, we must go to the source of the weapons. So there are those who are manufacturing, and at the same time, they dump it on us. We are foolish enough to take what is destroying us. Were we to be using the resources that we expend to buy the small arms and light weapons, to set up cottage industries, to improve schools and establish more, then you will be enhancing the human capital in our country. With a human capital that is great, productivity will rise, poverty will be reduced, and Nigeria, I dare say, will be a better country. So the merchants are there, and we are the consumers. We must get rid of our consumption habit.
All right, let me go to Musa Salmanu. Musa, would you say that the African Union has enjoyed enough cooperation from the international organizations where some of these weapons come from? Still talking about the proliferation of weapons in the continent.
Yes, to a large extent, the ambassador has said, we have to accept that we have been foolish enough to accept this, or to be the consumers of these goods that are not even wanted in those countries that they are being produced. While there have been a lot of efforts, half-hearted some of them, by the producers or the countries or regions where these weapons are produced, but you find out that there is no motivation in whatsoever for them to stop them being brought here. Some of these, to be fair, they are illegal. A lot of them, more than a large percentage, are illegal. I think in the last count, some statistics are saying more than 16 million. And I'm sure that has gone higher than that. Now, you find out that these go through our borders that are already porous borders, and other countries that have been having conflicts. So now what happens is that the motivation to get this are exacerbated by the issues of conflict. Once there is conflict, there is the motivation to get more arms. When there is less conflict, there's the motivation to kind of get more arms so that you prepare for the next conflict that is coming. The only way to get away from this, like the ambassador said, is through human development. When people are going out of poverty, the incentive to go into violent conflict is less. When there is good governance, the incentive to go into violent conflict is less, because there are more ways or democratic ways of solving problems or disagreements between people, between communities. So when there are channels through which people can channel their grievances, when governments do not see the need to invest in hard security or more physical security, but thereby channel those resources to human security, you find out that the incentives or the likelihood that people will go into violence is less, or violent conflict is less. When there is no violent conflict, the tendency that these arms will find a willing market around here is very less. So it's tied down to one thing, which is when there is development in Africa, which the initiative is tied to, prosperity. When there is prosperity, there is going to be more cooperation. When there is more cooperation, there is less incentive for violence. And when there is less incentive for violence, this market will not be. So whether it's actually the open market or it's the underground market, this is exacerbated and this is encouraged by the fact that there is a willing market and there are people that are foolish enough to fight one another, to kill one another using these weapons. So no matter what everyone else in other continents do, we must decide as Africans to say enough of this, enough of us wanting by every little thing we want to go into to start fighting one another, and also the political will of leaders to say there are better ways to resolve conflicts than using the gun.
Okay. Well, Ambassador, back to you now in the studio. Would you say that there are funding gaps in implementing some of the policies initiated by the AU, and whether or not those funding gaps has exposed the AU to some kind of interference or influence by external bodies?
Well, a straight answer to your question will be a yes, there are funding gaps, and indeed these gaps have affected the capacity of the AU to meet some of its own objectives. But that's how far as it goes. And I'll come back to the issue of political will. If you are committed to a thing and you believe sincerely in it, you will put your money where your heart is. The continent, I dare say, has not really put its money where its heart is. That's on one hand. But on the other end, I want to build on what Wing Commander Salmanu just said regarding the issue of managing conflicts and the issue of governance centrally. Across Africa, but even more so in Nigeria, which is our base in our country and the only country that we have, 4 things have come to the fore. And what I'm saying about Nigeria is a reflection to a certain degree of other countries on the continent. The very first area is our diversity. The second is the issue of ethnicity. The third is religion. And the overarching project of politics. When you bring diversity, is diversity supposed to be a source of strength or a source of weakness? What has ethnicity got to do with the capacity of a person, the endowment of a person? What has religion got to do with your ability to perform or to deliver? But you have a situation where now and again we bring religion, ethnicity, and politics into what we do. And these are the triggers often for the conflicts that you find across the continent. And where you do not manage your diversity in a manner that it becomes a boon to development, but use it as an obstacle, you are never going to make progress. And so, the foolishness of it all is we keep doing the wrong things and hoping that we'll get the right results. Or define a goal. 2020 was supposed to be the end goal of silencing the guns. Now it has been extended to 2030. Unless we change the way we do our things, 2030 will come and go. It's only 7 years from now to 2030, but new conflicts are emerging. Simple call. Let us go back. Do what will enhance our unity, do what will enhance our stability, and let us be fair and equitable in the things that we do. These done, you will see there will be less clamor for the things that actually give rise to the conflicts that we're dealing with. So I agree with you that the resources available to the AU have greatly, not just, partially hampered the realization and achievements of the African Union in many of its laudable goals and objectives.
All right, let me go to Musa Salmanu finally on your thoughts there. Do you think that the 2030 goal for silencing the guns on the African continent is realistic, and whether or not we have made enough efforts to meet up with that target?
This is a difficult one. Realistically, and this is not being a pessimist. It's very difficult to realize because the signs are there. And like the ambassador has said, we have not looked at those the fundamental issues that cause this conflict. Have we managed diversity in a way that it strengthens what we have? Have we managed religion? Have we managed politics? And so on. Have we done that? Have we ensured that there is justice, and not only that it must be seen to be done. Have we ensured that the democratic space is strengthened in a way that people have means through which they can air their grievances in a way that they feel respected? Have we also, as leaders, determined that we're going to have the political will to move on and to even, because it takes a lot of political will to even talk with someone that is opposing you, someone on the other side of the divide. And that is a responsibility of leadership to also open that space. So until there is that, I'm afraid to say that 2030 might not be realized. If you look in the past from 2020 till now, we've had 9 attempted or successful coups in Africa. West Africa particularly have more of them. And one of the characteristics of those coups is that they are popular. That means whenever the coup happens, you find out that the population or the citizens welcome back such an aberration. So what it says is that there is so much out there. There is so much energy that needs to be tapped in.
Yeah.
There is so much that needs to be done to bring prosperity to everyone in a way that people are able to talk, to dialogue, and to cooperate among themselves instead of fighting among themselves. Until we do that, I'm afraid 2030 will still be a mirage.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Ambassador, in 1 minute or two, we've seen several coups on the continent, and in many of these countries, we are seeing a shift in alliances. For instance, in Burkina Faso, Mali, we've seen them, kind of severe ties with their former colonialists, France, and moving more aligning to Russia and the rest of them. Is that the way to go, really, in ending the conflict?
Not necessarily. But the point here is the world is changing, and I expect Africa to change with the world for the better. Now, nobody out there will come to bring peace to Africa. Peace in Africa, peace in Nigeria can only derive from within. Talking about a shift in alliances, of course, Burkina Faso and Mali have shown how dissatisfied they are with their former colonial master. They are looking for what? For a new alliance, including this tectonic shift toward Russia, hiring mercenaries to come and fight a local war. Let us as Nigerians not pretend that this cannot and may not happen to us as a people.
Okay.
It is a wake-up call. We must come together as a people, have a government that is responsive and responsible to the people.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, because of time, we have to end the discussion here. Thank you so much, Ambassador Bulus Lolo, former Nigeria's ambassador to Ethiopia, and Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired, who is a former United Nations expert on mission and also security expert. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's our show for today. In case you've missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube live stream. Join us again next week for another time on the program. I am Ayuba Ilia. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.